Number 1.
For clarification, I'm a 26-year-old female, and I work the front desk at the public library. Let me tell you about Hank. He's mid-30s, average-looking guy, and he's always with his mother. He has some sort of mental deficiency that no one is really sure of. From what I've heard, he suffered brain damage as a child, which gives him a speech impediment. Most of all, he loves to read. Once or twice a week, Hank and his mother come in with bags overflowing with books to return, only to come back to the desk with an equally tall pile of books to check out. He'll talk about his favorites out of the return bag and rattle off lists of titles for us to reserve for him. When he's not physically in the library, he calls us with requests or just to ask if his previous orders are ready. And speaking of those orders, his lists are so long that something arrives for him almost every day. Rarely a day goes by where Hank isn't mentioned in some way at the library. All the librarians know Hank, and he knows all of us by name. And he's usually polite and upbeat, and likes to share what he's reading with us. This all would be fine if Hank's favorite genre didn't happen to be romance. And I don't mean Nicholas Sparks. I'm talking about the endless abyss of Harlequin sleeves, pulpy paperbacks with nearly broken spines, and covers bearing cheeky titles and glistening faceless torsos locked in passionate embrace. Obviously, these books are popular to begin with, and we librarians see all kinds of snicker-worthy titles getting checked out. We're all adults, and we've all read our share of smut, so it's not as if we're a bunch of prudes passing judgment. But most patrons have some sense of modesty when it comes to their more sexier checkouts. Hank doesn't hold back. He has absolutely no shame about his romance habit, because, as far as I can tell, to him they're just books, no different from any other book in the library. He'll spout the most ridiculous-sounding titles and gush about the authors with the same unchecked enthusiasm teenagers have. So far, this is all quite harmless, if not a little unusual. My problem with Hank is that I'm his favorite. I could tell from the moment I met him that he liked me. Given how friendly and personal he was, it only got uncomfortable when one day he invited me over to his house. Of course, I politely declined, but he went on to explain that he and his mom had really fixed the place up, and we could have dinner and play Xbox together. I again said no and mentioned that I had a boyfriend, to which Hank became visibly frustrated and said it was nothing like that, he just wanted to hang out with me. I declined again, and he finally gave up and left. I freaked out, but slightly amused, I hurried to the break room to tell my friends. They all laughed and told me that Hank was known to become very interested in new staff, and this wasn't the first time that someone had been invited to his house. So I brushed it off and didn't take it too personally. Another incident was not so easy to ignore. It was the day before Christmas break, so the library was predictably dead. My coworkers and I had a nice time kicking back and chatting about our plans for the holidays, seeing to the few patrons we had. The phone rings, I answer, and it's Hank. We exchange pleasantries and he asked about renewing his books. Business as usual. I process his request, we say Merry Christmas, and I'm about to hang up when I hear, "Hey." I put the phone back up to my ear, and in a quiet, sheepish voice, he says, "You are really cute," and then hangs up. Fast forward a few months later, and once again, when I pick up the phone, it's Hank. As I said, he calls pretty frequently, and somehow I'm usually the one to answer the phone. He often keeps me on the phone for 10 minutes or more while he talks about his books and places requests, and while I've come to expect it, it doesn't make the process any easier or less annoyingly time-consuming. During this particular call, after he's already had me on the phone for a while, meanwhile a line is forming at the desk, he eventually asks me to read the description of a particular book. I'm caught off guard, since that is not really a common question, but I look up the title on Amazon, The book jacket is so overloaded with flowery language that you could practically hear the bodices ripping. I quickly decided there was no way I was going to read this out loud to a man over the phone, and I told him that there was no description listed in the library catalog, and with that, he abruptly ended the call. Keep in mind that between these incidents, I still see Hank all the time. If I'm with another patron, he'll wait, even if my coworkers are available to him. When he's got me, he's very reluctant to let go. He spends as much time as he can at my desk, fiddling with his bag, asking redundant questions, all the while clearly racking his brain for what to say next. He always tells me how nice I look. Meanwhile, his mother stands next to him, avoiding eye contact with me, mostly silent. When she does speak, it's only to say, "Hank," with an insistent tone, whenever he lingers for too long at the desk. There are times she has to practically drag him away. Her sheer embarrassment bordering on contempt used to bother me out of sympathy for Hank. These days, I wonder if she knows something we don't. The latest incident was the tipping point. Hank and his mother came in, unloading the returns into the bin, Hank already babbling about what he wants renewed. His mother quickly disappears to do her browsing, and I set to filling Hank's request. He then asks if I could tell him what he currently has on hold. He orders so many books he rarely remembers what he ordered, and I'm already groaning inside when I see the list of over 30 entries on it. I start reading the titles aloud, which start off with sci-fi fantasy, then suddenly I'm careening down the list of about 20 books that all include the term bad boys. It was a fucking series, and each title was more puntastic than the last. I tried to be professional, but I'm sure my disgust was obvious as I kept reading the titles. I felt like everyone was listening to this and enjoying my discomfort, Hank especially. When I finally reached the end of the list, I looked up at him. He was beaming, his eyes wide with excitement, and suddenly I felt sick. He leaned in and said, "What was that last one again?" My hopeful librarian mask was completely gone by this point. I set my jaw, shut my eyes, and said slowly, without a hint of sweetness, "I like bad boys." Hank flashed me another huge smile and said a quick thank you before running off, practically giggling with glee. After that, I took my break and hid in the back until I was sure he and his mother had left. That last bit happened about 2 weeks ago, and ever since, I've tried my best to avoid Hank. When I see him coming, I make myself disappear. There's not much I can do about the phone call since that's left up to chance, but when I have spoken to him, I'm efficient, yet unfriendly. I hate to be that way, but it seems to be working, since he doesn't seem to hunt me down the way he used to. I like to think that he's made the connection between his behavior and my sudden coldness, but I doubt it. And even if he has, it hasn't stopped him from engaging in similar conversations with the other younger girls at the library. Maybe I'm being an insensitive asshole prude, but I simply don't believe he's as naive as he appears. And it's a little unnerving to humor a grown man the way you would a teenage boy. Either way, I can only hope he'll eventually run out of printed smut and make the leap to digital. Then whatever happens is between him and Amazon. Number 2. This is by far the most scariest experience I've had in my life, and it wasn't even me being stalked. It was my ex-girlfriend 4 years ago. We were both 18, and we had just started at a community college nearby. Our schedules were pretty similar. We intentionally put 2 of our 5 classes with each other and took lunch off at the same time, so we could eat with a mutual group of friends. A month and a half into school, my girlfriend tells me that she notices a guy who's been following her around campus, and she describes him as someone who looks like he works there. I asked her to recount some particular instances, and the only one she told me was that he waited outside the library for her to finish schoolwork for the past week. and on her way to her car, she always saw him sitting in the same bench, facing the direction she parks in. I was a bit concerned, but it's college. Everybody has a routine. Maybe his was to wait for someone outside the library and then sit on the bench. I tell her that I'll go to the library with her during her study hour and do some of my work, and if the guy has ill intentions, he'll back off once he sees me with her. Now, it's important to note that I don't appear to be physically intimidating at all. I'm very slim and not muscular at all. I figured I probably wasn't going to scare anybody away, but it's worth a shot, and it comforted her at the time. We go to the study, and we're sitting in front of the glass windows that separate the library from the hallway, and suddenly she nudges my notebook and whispers while we're still looking down at our work. "He's watching us. Look by the staircase." I look over and I see the guy who's, at most, 35 years old. I figured there was no way he worked there. He looked too young. I couldn't tell if he was in his late 20s or early 30s, but he looked simultaneously youthful, but experienced, if that makes any sense. Not somebody you would expect to be stalking or anything. He had a messenger bag with him, so I figured he might have been a student. Me thinking quickly and wanting to see if this guy was really stalking my girlfriend, I tell her to get up and pretend to leave the library and head downstairs towards the cafe. She listens and gets about 30 seconds down the hall before the guy starts following her. I immediately know something's up with this guy and he's stalking my girlfriend. I rush out of the library and he's only a few meters down the hallway, so I, as casually as possible, spark a conversation with this guy, pretending like I recognized him from somewhere. I asked him if I could walk with him and he said sure. Me and him walked downstairs and my girlfriend was almost never out of sight. He followed probably 15 meters behind her the whole way down to the cafeteria. He sits down at the table and I pretend like I have to keep walking and just say the formalities, goodbye and nice meeting you and such. As soon as I get outside the door, I call my girlfriend and tell her to come out here. I told her when she gets outside to come around the corner of the building. The doorway is right near the corner, so that he couldn't see where she walked to from inside, and would probably attempt to come around here looking for her. Lo and behold, he comes out a minute after her and turns into us. I'm standing there with her, and he's now looking at the two of us. And I ask him why the fuck is he following my girlfriend. He played it off like it was a coincidence and walked away. But after that, he ramped up his harassment. He texted her that night, saying something like,
"Why the fuck was your boyfriend so mouthy with me today?"
She didn't know who it was at first, until she texted, "Wrong number." And he responded with,
"No, it's not. On campus."
He started putting letters and gifts in her mailbox and slashed my tires, but stopped waiting outside the library. I hadn't seen him for weeks at this time, but he was completely terrorizing my girlfriend, and I was helpless to stop it since he was invisible. He was hiding in plain sight apparently, but we never saw him. I was ready to seriously hurt this guy. One night, I was doing some homework with my girlfriend at her house, and her family was out late visiting some distant relatives that lived about an hour away. It was just us in her house, and we heard a window shatter. We locked the bedroom door and called the police, who instructed her to stay on the phone with them. We had no idea who it was. All that was clear was that somebody had just broken into her house. I carry a knife almost everywhere with me, so I got that out. It's a little knife that I got as a gift from my brother, but I was ready to seriously hurt somebody if they tried hurting me or my girlfriend at this point. We heard him walking around outside the door. Suddenly, he starts opening doors in the house, but never closing them. He checks the pantry, the basement door, his parents' room, and the bedroom. By the time he gets to her bedroom door, we are well aware that he's nearby. We found out it was him when he jiggled the door handle and realized it was locked. He started saying,
"Aw, what's wrong, honey? Are you scared now? I bet you wish that guy you call your boyfriend was here to protect you."
He then kicked the door so hard, the bottom panel cracked. It wasn't broken, it just had a giant crack in the wood. My girlfriend screams. I then yell out, "I'm here, you fuck. Get the fuck out of this house and leave us the fuck alone," in the most intimidating voice I was able to muster. I was scared, but luckily, just as I said that, the police came in and arrested him. The window he smashed was the sliding door on the back porch. My girlfriend was severely shaken up, and I myself was freaking the fuck out. But at the time, I had a lot of adrenaline running through me. I was ready to kill a person that night, and that mindset is something that I will never forget. Once you are actually in a situation that you might have to defend yourself and kill somebody, you really begin to understand how much animal instinct dictates your behavior. It's terrifying to even know I was capable of thinking that way. My girlfriend and I are still very close friends to this day. We don't talk about this ever. I know her memory of this still messes with her, because she sometimes still sends me paranoid texts about seeing someone looking at her. The saddest thing that she has sent me was that she was afraid to go into her house because she walked in and all the doors were wide open, like the guy had left them that night. She's terrified of doors being opened around her because she thinks people could be hiding in those rooms, or that somebody is searching for her. We broke up for reasons unrelated to this, but I still love her as a friend, and she will always be very close to me. We very well could have died that night. I'm really happy that she told me about this guy when she did too. The guy ended up being a recidivist who had been to prison before for breaking into a girl's house that he had been stalking before stalking laws actually existed. So he was only charged with a B&E. How the fuck do these people end up getting released back into the public? They should be treated at a psych ward. He didn't have anything with him the night of the break-in, except for a box of trash bags in his car.
There's always a reason to be afraid.